Spectre Divide, a new competitive shooter released yesterday on the heels of Concorn's Next of Kin notice, and it's already sitting at mixed reviews, with an all-time peak player count of roughly 30,000 players. Is it any good? Does it have a future? Can it divide and conquer the current competitive gaming scene? Well, let's take aside the egregious microtransactions, paying upwards of $100 for weapon skins, and focus purely on just the game itself. It's not bad. So like many of you, you've probably heard of this game through YouTube or social media, and that's how I came across it. But in case you've been living under a rock, and you don't know what this game is, it's essentially a new competitive shooter that's kind of taking a spin on some things, which is basically introducing this concept of a Spectre, which allows you to basically switch between two bodies that you control, one at a time, and you can place them around the map and come up with all kinds of interesting strategies. The game is somewhat funded and endorsed by Shroud, who is a former competitive CSGO and Valorant player, and who's actually younger than me. Yeah, feeling kind of old. Not by much though, like 2 years, but still. Still. Where's the time gone, guys? Where's the time gone? Anyway, focus. The game is interesting. When I first saw gameplay for this game, and I was watching it and I was understanding the concept of it, it really did compel me to believe that this could be something unique. This could actually be a game that, I'm not going to say revolutionizes the whole competitive shooter market, but it's definitely doing something differently. Instead of having the traditional 5 versus 5 competitive team play, it's actually 3 versus 3, but because everyone controls 2 players, it's somewhat kind of 6 versus 6. It's this interesting twist on the concept of a competitive shooter. But is that enough? That's kind of the main question, is does it do enough compelling things to actually pull people from their already established games to come and play this one? That's the real question. I actually don't really know the answer to that. The game, I'm enjoying it. Okay, so there were play tests a little while ago. And the first one came out and I missed it entirely because I didn't realize it was only for a day. I thought a play test, usually goes on a little bit longer, 2-3 days. No, it was 1 day and I missed it. They had another play test a few weeks later, I'm guessing. I can't quite remember. And I got to play at that time and I was actually enjoying myself. And now that it's released, I was actually kind of excited to get back into it again. I started playing it. There were issues right out of the gate, finding matches, trying to just navigate anything. The menus barely functioned. It was very buggy and it was giving me tons of problems. But when I managed to get into a game after waiting and queuing for 10, 15 minutes at a time, I actually enjoyed myself. The game's running a lot smoother as of me playing it today. So that could have easily just been initial launch hiccups. Whatever the case is, it seems to be performing and running a little bit better now. And speaking of performance, because they decided to go with this kind of artistic, almost cel-shaded, comic style, Borderlands look to it, it has amazing performance. The game runs extremely smooth, butter smooth, and of course I have DLSS enabled as well, just to give me an extra frame boost, because hey, I'm playing on a gaming laptop and not a super fancy one either. I mean, it is fancy looking, but in terms of hardware, it's a basic RTX 3060 with a Ryzen 7 5800H. So it's nothing outlandishly performance inducing. You're not going to brute force your way through any game. It does require a little bit of finesse with settings to get some demanding games to run very smoothly. This game is running maxed out in 1440p. I don't even really need DLSS because I don't actually gain a huge boost to my frame rate when I have it enabled, but I do enable it just because, hey, when there are frame gains to be had, I want them frames. But circling back, I enjoyed what I was playing, mainly because it had an interesting concept to it. The gameplay itself is fairly basic. It's not like it's revolutionized the way weapon handling is. Weapons behave in very much the same way that most competitive shooters have. You got typical recoil patterns on most of the guns. You can actually go into the settings and alter the way that the recoil pattern behaves on your screen. You can like lock it to your hip fire so that your screen won't move and only the weapon will actually move. So the weapon sights move independently from the actual screen view. And then you can also change it around to something it'll follow the recoil so that it'll deviate slightly from the center of your screen, or you can lock it directly to the center of your screen, which then will have more bouncing. You'll get the illusion, the sensation of more bouncing on your screen due to the recoil. So you can change things like that, but the bullets go exactly where you are aiming. They do not deviate, they do not skew, they don't do anything like that. They go exactly where your crosshair is pointed, with the exception of hip firing. So really, the only thing this game actually has going for it is this whole Spectre gimmick. Is it a gimmick? Like, you kind of have to think about the gunplay, everything else is still mostly in line with competitive shooters out there. It's not like they've come up with their own game modes. They've changed the way weapons handle. Like the loadout screen when you're going to the buy screen is a little differently, because when you're buying weapons, you're actually buying pairs. So you're not going to be able to pick and choose which operator, which Spectre, which person gets what. It's literally just, hey, I'm buying a shotgun and SMG combo. One gets a shotgun, one gets an SMG. You don't really get to pick and choose which is which. So you're kind of stuck like choosing weapon kits and then tailoring the playstyle around that. And I mean, it all kind of comes together to give you an interesting experience, which I actually enjoy. Whether or not it's going to be enough for other people is the real question. And I feel like because it doesn't do enough differently, and then again, how do you even convince people that not changing the formula but introducing a new mechanic is a worthy enough change to pull you away from your already established competitive shooters? People who are playing Counter-Strike play Counter-Strike. People that are playing Valorant play Valorant. You're not going to be able to convince these people that because you have one main change in your game, which is the introduction of this whole Spectre idea, is going to bring them out of those games. Because the rest of the formula is cut and dry. Everything else is more or less exactly the same as every other competitive game out there. It doesn't seem to have like the gadgets, like the abilities, the customization, like everything is more or less in line with every other game out there. It doesn't do anything notably different other than the Spectre mechanic. So you're really just relying on players to try the game and actually enjoy this one mechanic enough to want to continue to have a growing player base. Because this game has to grow. In order for it to be sustainable, it has to have a bigger player base. Like, look what's happening to X-Defiant. X-Defiant's player numbers are starting to dwindle, and now they're being threatened to shut down that game, because if they cannot get the player base up within a 2-month period, that game may close down as well. The way that Concord went. They need higher player numbers. These AAA studios need lots of people playing these games to actually make good on their bottom line, which is making money. And they've already had insanely high prices, and actually as of the time of this recording, I've seen that they reduced the prices across the store permanently, and they're going to refund people who have paid the excess amount for the in-game cosmetics already. So that just changed today, which is a good move on their part, because the prices were already outrageous, and the people who were playing were pretty vocal about how ridiculous the prices were and how they didn't want to pay any money. And how are they going to make money if you price out everybody who's willing to pay for it? Not everybody is a whale who's just willing to throw money at their screen. A lot of people are just coming home after work, struggling to make payments, having to choose where they want to spend their money. And where are they going to spend their money? On a free-to-play competitive shooter that may or may not survive long-term? Or they're going to put their money on something like Space Marine 2. That's what I would do personally. I would buy a game I know is going to be great versus a free-to-play game that's so expensive to buy skins, which I don't buy skins. So for me, it's like irrelevant. I'm going to play the game for free. But for those who want to actually buy stuff, who want to support the game, but you only have one cost, yeah, it's a little ridiculous. So the fact that they just rolled back, they made it cheaper for everybody. I don't know how much cheaper, I didn't look into it, but I'm assuming it's going to be cheaper than $100 for skins. It's a better move on their part to help facilitate player retention and hopefully player base growth. Whether or not these changes will actually have a profound effect in the long run, where player numbers will continue to grow, where this game can actually maybe become something to become an esports type of game. That's what the developers want to see, right? They were making this game. The whole idea is like, when they made Rainbow Six Siege, they had a vision, right? And that vision was to be like esports competitive shooter type of game. And they achieved it tenfold. Like, that game's been doing extremely well on that front. It's not what us original fans of Rainbow Six wanted, but they did a phenomenal job pushing towards their goal. I don't agree with it, but that's my personal hang up on it. So the developers clearly want to see this game go somewhere. And it's really up to them to see if they can just, you know, convince the players that this is a worthy game of your time. I personally will continue to play it and enjoy it while I can, and we'll see what the future brings. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.